In 1995, Yu Suzuki's AM2 released Fighting Vipers into arcades. Built using the same game engine as the phenomenally popular Virtua Fighter 2 and running on Sega's cutting-edge Model 2 arcade hardware, Fighting Vipers took the arcades by storm. With its roster of unique characters, new armor and weapon mechanics, and over-the-top gameplay, Fighting Vipers was a certified hit, making the leap to the Saturn less than a year after its arcade release in August 1996. 2 years later, in January 1998, a sequel was released utilizing Sega's new Model 3 arcade hardware, adding to the character roster and building on the Fighting Vipers' winning formula, and in 2001, like the original, Fighting Vipers 2 received a home conversion, this time ported to the Dreamcast, exclusively in Japan and Europe. Join me today as we take a look and do a quick review of the European PAL release of Fighting Vipers 2 for the Dreamcast. This is Half Circle Forward. Fighting Vipers 2 story picks up 2 years after the events of the first game, with the city still under the control of BM, the series' main antagonist and final boss. To retain his control, BM has enacted a Viper hunt to capture all that oppose him. Let's be honest, the storyline is wafer thin. Players take on the role of one of 11 Vipers. The original roster of Vipers return and are joined by 2 additions, Emmy and Charlie. The game also has 2 unlockable characters, Del Sol and Kun. Gameplay remains largely unchanged from the original, again utilizing the classic 3-button Virtua Fighter punch, kick, block layout. Attacks can be chained into combos and power moves, each doing damage to your opponent's armor, one of the original Fighting Vipers' big selling points. The armor gauge at the top of the screen shows the level of damage to each player's torso and leg armor. Once the armor is weakened to the point of breaking, a final hit knocks it off. Further attacks to the unprotected areas take an increased amount of damage, increasing the importance of strategical blocks and parries. New to Fighting Vipers 2 is the Super KO. Should you end up in a situation where all of your armor is broken, you have the opportunity to trigger the Super KO by pressing all 3 buttons at once. Timing is essential, but if you can nail it, you'll land an outrageous stage-ending attack. Fights once again take place in walled stages that can be interacted with, whipping opponents into walls and using them for juggle combos. As in the original, should you time it right and land a power move on a weakened opponent, you can slam them through the wall, destroying it in the process. It's incredibly satisfying. Graphically, each of the original Vipers has seen a significant graphical upgrade and look great. Character sprites are over the top, large and vibrantly coloured, with a higher level of detail than the original, as you'd expect. The 2 new additions to the roster, Emmy and Charlie, fit in well and really do look the part. Animations are silky smooth and fluid, leading to fast-paced, intense fights. The stages themselves unfortunately didn't fare quite as well graphically in their conversion over from the Model 3 code. While the arenas themselves look clean and sharp, the backgrounds look less impressive. It's a little complaint, and to be fair, it works, but I get the feeling that some corners were cut. The soundtrack is classic Sega arcade fare, introducing new tracks along with a handful of reworked themes from the original game. Sound effects are crisp and clear, adding to the atmosphere of the game. It's exactly what you'd expect from AM2. So the presentation and the mechanics are pretty solid. What about the game modes? Like any Sega home port, there's standard arcade and versus modes. A random mode, which is essentially exactly the same as the arcade mode, just offering up opponents in a random order, survival, and training modes. On the face of it, 5 different modes seem pretty robust, but the lack of variety really stands out when you're comparing Fighting Vipers 2 to other home ports that are absolutely jam-packed with additional content. Soul Calibur and the Dead or Alive series immediately spring to mind. There's definitely a lot of fun to be had with Fighting Vipers 2, but it would have been nice to have seen a few more game modes, or at the very least, a deeper training mode. While it's certainly not perfect, it's more than a competent home port that fans of the series will certainly enjoy. If you've got a Dreamcast and you're a fan of Sega's 3D fighters, or if you're just a fan of fighting games in general, Fighting Vipers 2 is definitely worth a look. The weapon and armor mechanics, along with its over-the-top aesthetic, set Fighting Vipers 2 apart from its Dreamcast peers, even with its limited replay value. I hope you've enjoyed our look at Fighting Vipers 2 for the Dreamcast. If you have, please drop us a like and also consider subscribing. It's really helping the channel grow. And don't forget to check us out on Twitter. Thanks for watching.